It's the Prison News Podcast on Spreaker. Greetings and welcome to Prison News. I'm your host. First up, the podcast made from inside prison. Two brothers, Eddie and Emil, sit in a small room that they share, each on his own bed. Emil wants to watch a soap opera on TV. Eddie, a devout Seventh-day Adventist, asks him to use headphones so he won't have to hear the TV on the Sabbath. Fine in theory, but the headphones are too short. And while they're on the bed, Emil takes them off. Eddie, who remembers soap operas playing in his violent childhood home, turns off the TV. Emil turns it back on. The tensions continue for days, escalating beyond electronics. Eddie stops showering in protest. Emil starts smoking in bed. Eddie and Emil aren't just sharing a room, they're also inmates sharing a cell. The scene is recounted by the brothers themselves in the first episode of the podcast network Radiotopia's show Ear Hustle, which launched in June and will run through October. The brilliant series is a collaboration between the inmates, Erlon Woods and Antoine Williams, and the prison volunteer, Nigel Poor, and it is conceived, recorded, and produced from inside San Quentin State Prison. The show addresses legislative issues through the personal narratives of inmates. Next, thousands of Texas inmates evacuated. Thousands of inmates were being evacuated on Saturday from three prisons in Texas: Richardson, Brazos, and River. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice said that about 4,500 inmates, boy, that's a lot, would be transported from the Ramsey, Terrell, and Stringfellow units in Rosharon, which is just south of Houston, to the other facilities in East Texas. Now, the prisoners are being transported by bus and accompanied by correctional officers and other staff. I wonder who other staff are. Anyway, we're doing everything we can to make sure everybody's safe while the evacuation process is being carried out, said Robert Hurst, a public information officer with the Criminal Justice Department. Now, he did not say where the prisoners would be taken or even how long the process might take. While away from Rosharon, the prisoners will not be available for visits at the designated receiving units, but they'll have the ability to use the offender telephone system. Next, a witness's prison garb gets a murder conviction overturned. Newark, New Jersey. Where else? A man serving a 55-year sentence after being convicted in a 2011 killing will get a new trial because of the clothing that the person testifying as a defense witness was wearing during this trial. According to an appellate decision Tuesday, witnesses testified on behalf of Kevin David as he stood on trial that he shot Tyrell Coleman to death. And when that happened, the guy was wearing prison attire and handcuffs. Now, during that testimony, there were some concerns. One was that the jail uniforms and the cuffs, David's attorney argued, undermined their credibility and prejudiced the jury.
We agree that he was deprived of a fair trial when a witness crucial to his defense testified in jail garb and handcuffs,
two appellate judges wrote in their decision. When witnesses need to be restrained for security reasons, the appeals court ruled a hearing must be held about it. Next, Dr. Phil gets 16 years for prison scalding. Newcastle, Indiana. A felon who scalded a fellow inmate at the Newcastle Correctional Facility with boiling water has been sentenced to an additional 16 years in prison. Philip L., quote, Dr. Phil, unquote, Sadler, now 51, in recent days pleaded guilty to aggravated battery in Henry Circuit Court 2. His sentence was imposed by Judge Kit Crane. Now, Judge Kit says that Sadler, serving a 30-year sentence for a 1992 rape conviction in Marion County, poured a mixture of boiling water and liquid soap into the face and chest of an inmate Travis Hawley, as he slept on his prison bunk. Now, he also slammed the burned victim's head against a bathroom wall and kicked him in the face in a bid to make him fall down a flight of stairs. Now, there was a reason for this. folks. This is here at Prison News. You're going to hear the reasons, and you can digest it yourself. It says that Sadler told investigators that he, quote, got caught up in his emotions after Holland serving a sentence for child molesting. Now, that's the guy that got the hot water and soap poured on him. After Holland serving a sentence for child molesting, borrowed a container of liquid soap from him and failed to return it. As I've told you folks here on Prison News time after time after time, it's different in prison. It's not like what you read about or something like that. It's a whole different lifestyle there. Next up, how long is life or a life sentence for Alabama inmates in prison? Not as long as you might think. Now, currently, more than 200 people are sentenced to spend their lives in Alabama prisons, and that's just from last year. But for those given the possibility of parole, just how long is life? Well, here it is. When someone's convicted of a life sentence in Alabama, judges can determine whether the defendant should receive a life sentence with or without the possibility of parole. Now, if given the possibility of parole, sentences can be much shorter than that. Actually, depending on the crime, an inmate can be eligible for parole consideration after serving just 10 years of that life sentence. Now, Eddie Cook, he's the Assistant Executive Director of the Alabama Board of Pardon and Paroles, kind of breaks it down here for us. He tells us that a Class A felony in the crime involving injures a victim, then that person that's been given a life sentence can be considered for parole after serving 15 years or 85% of their sentence, whichever is the lesser of the two. I don't understand that particular math, but let's get back to text here. The vote in these cases does not have to be unanimous by a 3-member parole board. So if you get a fix-in, I guess you can get bring the guy out early. However, on the other hand, if a person is a repeat offender for crimes involving drug thefts and things like that, and you get a sentence to life, they'll be eligible for parole in just 10 years. Now, here's one. Inmate discovered missing from Lompoc prison camp. Now, an inmate was discovered missing Thursday afternoon from the minimum security federal prison camp in Lompoc. Prison officials first noted that Victor Gerardo was missing shortly after 4 p.m., according to a prison spokesperson. He's believed to have walked away. Now, the U.S. Marshals Service and other law enforcement agencies were notified, and an internal investigation was initiated, at least according to prison officials. Hurtado is a Hispanic male with black hair and brown eyes. He's 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighs 175 pounds. Anyone with information about Hurtado is encouraged by the prison. Now, the prison's encouraging you to contact local law enforcement. They've kind of washed their hands of it, looks like. So good luck, local law enforcement. We'll follow this one here. Here's a sad one. UK rape hoaxer gets 10 years in prison. A British woman dubbed an attention-seeking liar for falsely accusing 15 men of rape and sexual assault during 4 separate encounters was sentenced Thursday to 10 years in prison. Gemma Beale, repeat, Gemma Beale, 25 years old. She looks, there's a picture of her here. She looks kind of like that woman they call Rosie. Was found guilty at London's Southwark Crown Court in July on 4 counts of perjury and 4 counts of perverting the course of justice. Judge Nicholas Lorraine Smith. Now, Judge Nicholas has a hyphenated last name, and his hyphenated last name is Lorraine Smith, called Beale a convincing liar who liked being pitied as a victim. The trial has revealed that was then not obvious that you're a very, very convincing liar and that you enjoy being seen as a victim, Lorraine Smith said in court. The prosecution described your life as a construct of bogus victimhood. Now, this construct of bogus victimhood is something that these guys had a hard time unraveling. Now, Beale maintains her innocence, and she says she's considering filing an appeal. Now, it says here that, of course, a lawyer involved, Mrs. Beale stands by her claims in this matter, that if she had her time again, she would also plead not guilty. Now, investigators spent almost $250,000 and over 6,000 hours investigating these bogus claims about her accusing people of sexually assaulting her when they didn't. And, of course, they had analyzed evidence, and they concluded the accusations were fake. Now, Beale is responsible for fabricating a series of extremely serious allegations, which led to several extensive investigations being carried out and teams of detectives and special officers spending thousands of hours on the case, said Detective Sergeant Kevin Lynott. Well, they talk about her manipulating the criminal justice system to get this attention and making false claims. Folks, this is a brief snippet of prison news. Now, when you hear these things, think about what you're hearing about the accusations of all these prison news broadcasts, about the time served. We haven't had any escape attempts lately. There'll be a couple coming up on the next show, if what I'm hearing is correct. And bear in mind that when you hear and read something in the paper or in the media or on the web, read it closely and say, what's happening here? Is this inmate getting arrested? Is this victim being served properly? What happened to them? Is restitution being made? Or is a fix of some sort in? In other words, are things happening behind closed doors when the inmate never serves their time and sometimes is released way too early and reoffends again and again and again? Well, folks, take care. Best to all of you. It's time for that prison bell. Wait a minute. I think we've got one more thing we can do here. Let's take just a quick little look here at the prison mentioned a few times in the Bible. I always like to read just a couple excerpts. Now, guys are in this country of Canada and the United States, people are typically not chained, day and night. But as we turn the clock back, I read a verse here, who having received such a charge, thrust them into the inner prison and made their feet fast in stocks. Okay. That talks later on about an earthquake so that the foundations of a prison were shaken. It talks about a keeper of a prison told the sane that the magistrates are said to let you go. So sometimes magistrates will try to do an early release, even back in the time of Acts 16:36, if you choose to read that yourself. Jesus, of course, I'd like to read what he said. Fear none of these things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. And then lastly, the old devil gets put in prison too. Last book of the Bible, Revelation 27, says, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. So, folks, prison is basically a fact of life from the time of the Bible to the time of right now. If you're in a prison of some sort, I suggest that you get yourself out of it. It could be drug use. Sure, it could be a serial behavior. You could be some kind of a predator. And it might be a predator from just stealing lunch money at work. It doesn't have to be the grand, gaudy thing. Something way down inside you could be wicked and twisted and need some help. And if that's the case, you might give some serious consideration to this Jesus that's just talked about, this prison business I read. When he was crucified on the cross, now I'm talking about the good Jesus. I'm not talking about Bar Jesus or the Jesus in Waco, Texas, who got, burnt out down there, these false guys. The real Jesus Christ says you need to be born again. He came to destroy the works of the devil, and he can help you. He really can. How do you do that? Well, believe that when he was crucified, instead of you taking the hit, so to speak, or doing the sentence in prison, he's doing the whole thing for you. Just faith in Christ, it's called. It's what's sometimes called the born-again experience. Go ahead and get in on that thing. Get in on the born-again experience. Tell Jesus Christ, yes, clean me up. Yes, I believe you. I'm trusting you for my salvation. And the old saying, well, what do you got to lose? Anyway, folks, take care. God bless all of you. It is time to ring that prison bell. Until next time, God bless all of you, and bye for now.